I was clinically diagnosed with OCD at about 45. However, I already had some loose, diagnosis with that previously. But going back into my history, OCD was very, very prominent. So on the outside, I was really quite confident, and then my mind was a constant mess. So I was constantly thinking about the but what ifs. And I can remember, waking up first thing in the morning as a little kid, and the first thing that came to mind was, what do I have to worry about today? So I was anxious, but not general social anxiety. So, you think, as I said before, I'm 52. So back when I was a kid, you didn't just go out and drop your kid at a psychologist. And I mean, that really wasn't even a
No.
thing until maybe 10 years ago. So all of my little idiosyncrasies and all of the things that I did that, were probably laughed about or were in my mind and I didn't know how to express them have been there since I can remember. So very much intrusive thoughts, but what ifs. I can remember like being 9 and being absolutely beside myself because I'd had this thought, what if when I die, my mum's not my mum in heaven? And I couldn't stop thinking about that. So a lot of people think OCD is lining cans up in a row
Mm.
or having everything highly organised. That can be a very, loose symptom, but for most people it's extremely unreasonable, unrealistic, intrusive thoughts that take you to places that you just don't want to go. And that they just change themes with the different ages and stages you go through. So
Justine, where does that come from? I know that's such a broad question, but is it trauma? Is it your parents' divorce? Like, where is the root cause of that?
it's very interesting. I have done a lot of work on this in recent years, in the last probably 5 or 6 years. And there's definitely been some things within my childhood that caused me or created a lot of natural anxiety. Whether that then manifested as it did, who's to know? It's not like something along the lines of my borderline personality disorder, which are heavily, associated with some kind of trauma. It's a form of anxiety, but who knows if I wouldn't have had it if
Mm.
I hadn't had some of the experiences that I'd had. As I said, I can't remember not having that kind of brain.
Do you think it was, and this is getting into woo-woo spirituality, do you think it was you were born with it? Do you think it was passed down through the lineage?
I think there's probably a bit of both. My son has clinically diagnosed OCD, and I was hyper aware of the symptoms and how that manifested. So he had some counselling really early on and got that diagnosis, and he's done really well with it. Had that been something that I'd had some assistance with earlier, I may have learnt, some different strategies as well. So potentially there are, definitely some mental health conditions that are sitting in the background in my family history that would have contributed.
Mm.
Yeah.
With your son, what were the signs? I'm thinking if there's someone sitting at home who
Yeah.
are like, I think my child's got OCD, what were the signs that you thought, oh, he's got it?
One of the things that we tend to do with OCD before we learn not to is to constantly seek reassurance or validation that something's true or not true. So that would be something that he would do. I remember we used to joke about him never being able to lie at all because anything that was in his brain, he felt like he needed to tell us. It's difficult because when you're younger, they are slightly different to when you're an adult as well. And I'm not in his head, but I know he had a lot of intrusive thoughts
Okay.
and a lot of things manifested from very small issues or seeing something, and then he might seek reassurance. Mum, do you think that XYZ? Mum, do you know that XYZ? So it was difficult to know because he has actually, he doesn't mind me talking, he has been diagnosed only recently with level 1 autism. So his brain, he's a really, really, really smart kid. So his nickname was Google.com. So we've got this quirky kid that does all these different things, but he's done really, really well.
Mm.
But when your child is there was some anxiety, but a bit like me, it wasn't social anxiety. It was anxiety around the but what ifs. So
Mm.
almost looking into the future or different situations that were about to come up and having some really pertinent questions about it at a really young age.
Mm. So you were diagnosed later in life. We will get back to the alcohol and drugs, but I'm just so
Yeah.
curious. How does the OCD show up for you now? Is it something that you can heal from? Is it something that can be cured?
Mm. I'm not medicated. There are some great medications out there. There's some really good therapies as well. The really interesting thing when you said we'll come back to the alcohol, for the period that I drank, my OCD was very quiet.
Oh, there we go.
So when I got sober, hello, old friends back again.
It's like me with my sugar addiction. It was the underlying addiction.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, okay, I haven't seen from you for a little while. I had anxiety and gosh, the whole post-drinking next day general anxiety and chemically induced anxiety. But the intrusive thoughts and the revolving door kind of thing was a lot quieter. And well, clearly alcohol's going to numb that out. I don't think I ever got a chance to get it back again because the minute I was feeling anxious, I just drank again. So it was super, under the radar. I have to practice. One, I can never drink again. Two, I practice a lot of self-care. I do a lot of mindset work. I've had a lot of counselling in the last few years. I follow a lot of therapists and other OCD sufferers. Once again, community is everything. I remember only recently I watched a TikTok video of somebody who was throwing up in their real different thoughts that they had and driving down the street and thinking you may have hit somebody and not remembered or not had or you blacked out at the time, so you have to drive back and have a look again. The first time I saw that on a reel, I literally bawled my fucking eyes out because I'm like, I thought that was just me. And I didn't realize there's so many things that I've learned about my OCD in the last, I reckon even 12 months through social media in particular, that I'm like, okay, it is not normal for your brain to think like that. This is part of the condition, and it's given me the capacity to almost separate my OCD from who I am. Because one of the things that OCD does is it targets the thoughts and the obsessions target what you value the most. And there's different subcategories of OCD. It's so interesting. And mine has always been around the fear that I've hurt or will hurt somebody or have hurt somebody. And the driving down the street thing is not a joke. I have literally at times, you just drive down the street and then you go, oh, can't even remember really how I drove there. But you're on autopilot. You know what you're doing. Most people just drive and get there. If I'm particularly wound up or just a bit of a hyper state, like I've been running on adrenaline for a long time, that tends to be when my OCD really kicks up a level. So if my general anxiety's up, it will rear its head. And I can be driving down the street and I'll get to the end of the street and say, oh God, don't even remember how I got there. But hang on, maybe you hit something, an animal or something on the way and you didn't realize it. You must go back now, drive back and just check. I'll do that. And then I might get back down the end of the street and say, no, you didn't look properly. You need to go back and you need to drive again. And I can do that depending on how bad I am multiple times. Even though I know, if I think logically, if you'd hit something, if you were in some kind of catatonic state, you would wake up. But just from the impact. Two, you did watch the whole way. It's just not possible. But the brain doesn't sometimes allow me to register that straight away. One of my earliest memories with my OCD, and there was a lot, but one that I did religiously was I would go to bed at night and my door would be pushed open. But so clearly a door's open and you can see that it's up flush against the wall. and I can see there's nothing behind there. Well, I think I can see. I would have to pull it slightly ajar, kick behind it 3 times and push it back. And then multiple times if I hadn't trusted myself. So ironically, I just actually got my first couple of tattoos, and I had a bit of a rough start this year with my OCD, and I got in Polish zaufaj, which is trust yourself. And so that's a bit of a reminder for me. But yeah, the kicking behind the door was literally, it was like I couldn't trust my eyes. So I had to feel with my leg to make sure there was nothing behind there.
Justine,
Torturous.
trusting. Oh, I'm just exhausted for you. Like, truly. And I could feel the emotion when you said you finally felt understood. Like someone had seen you on social media. I could feel that from you, where it was almost like an exhale, like someone got you. You would know that with sobriety, it's all about trusting yourself and finally trusting yourself after giving away your power for years, if not decades. If you go sober and you still don't trust yourself, like how do you show up for yourself in sobriety with OCD?
That's a really good question. I think the OCD ebbs and flows, and I know that I guess one of the things that actually does help me is with my OCD, if it's really up a gear, I will go back to logic and say, you know what, trust yourself, because you trusted yourself to get sober. And I think for me, that's one of my, apart from having my children, is my greatest achievements ever, because it was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. And I trusted myself enough, even if in the beginning it was just passively and I was
day
following
by day,
the motions.
hour by hour.
Absolutely. And I really didn't know what I was doing. I ended up trusting myself enough to live life without the medication. And that for me sometimes is the evidence I need to pull me out of my OCD. And sometimes it's super silent. If I keep my cortisol levels as low as I can, as you possibly can in today's world, and practice all the self-care, the OCD tends to be a lot better.
When did you start self-medicating with alcohol?
Once again, that was a ebb and flow thing. I think the first time that I ever learnt I could medicate with alcohol and I could make my brain, which literally was what I wanted to numb down, understandably so sometimes, I partied like everybody else, but there was a distinct time where I'd broken up with a boyfriend who I was on and off with. The love of my life, was never going to find anybody like him. I was 19 and I was house sitting a family friend's place, and the phone rang. It was a wall phone. Just shows you.
I mean, bring them back. To be honest, bring them back.
To the lounge room and went to the wall phone. Anyway, long and shorts of it is he said, we cannot continue with this on and off kind of thing. And I was by myself, and I remember I took the Tallies bottles from the fridge and went back to bed. So I was actually already in bed when the phone rang. So I was going to sleep. So I wasn't up partying or doing anything. I took the Tallies from the fridge, went back to bed, and I drank enough to make me calm enough to sleep, because I was, I'm so upset, and it calmed me down enough to actually get to sleep. And that was the first time now when I go back and trace when it was, and clearly that was one of my activities in rehab as well, was when did that start? And that was the first time I can remember that's what, took the edge off it. And that's the first time I believe I medicated with alcohol.
Did you take drugs?
No. I'll tell you a story. I think I would have if this particular event had not occurred. I was all of probably same age, 19. And, back in my day, it was ecstasy and whatever else it was. I don't think we had the plethora of drugs that are around now. And I thought, yeah, this might be a bit of fun. And I think I may have decided I was going to that following weekend or something like that. And as I mentioned to you before, I was in the music industry, and I had some studio time booked up on Springbrook Mountain. There was a studio up there, and I had the flu or sinus or something like that. And the night before, I'd had a really crappy night's sleep, and I had a full day booked in the studio, and I didn't want to waste it. So I got up and I took some Tab, which was the only thing that was around for sinus back then, which is an antihistamine. And I'd not slept. So I went to the chemist and they said, oh, have some no-dose. Anyway, I was driving up the mountain, and all of a sudden my heart went like off its rocker. I pulled over. I had to sit there for an hour. It was just a really horrific event. And I do know now I have really high sensitivities to medications. I've never been able to take even antidepressants for longer than about 5 minutes. So my liver doesn't process things really as they should. So that was a really horrible event. And I remember I went to my GP afterwards just for a bit of a follow-up. And he said to me, you know what, you better not try recreational drugs, because if this can do this to you, you'll be dead. I'll find, that will be the next thing. And maybe my OCD saved me, because then that was I never, ever, ever touched drugs. I think I may have smoked weed twice or something like that. That was about it. Alcohol was my drug of choice because it didn't do that to me. It gave me everything at the time that I thought I needed.
What does your alcohol, would you say it was a dependency through your 20s, or were you a binge drinker?
Sporadic. I don't think, it was definitely not an everyday thing through my 20s. It was always around if I couldn't cope too well with anything. So that's when it would always, go up a notch. It was definitely my early 30s that it became much more prevalent. And I got married when I was 26 the first time. And that marriage, I'll say it helped me survive the marriage. But it definitely, in the latter part of that early 30s, that's when I was, medicating a lot more. And then look, there were times a few years later where it tapered off, but it was always present. 30s was my horrendous years with it.
What was going on in your life apart from the marriage breakdown? Were you working corporate? Like, what did it actually look like?
I was working corporate. So by trade, I'm a workplace trainer and assessor. So I was in Melbourne still, and I was working for corporate businesses down there, and early 30s. So I had my daughter at 29 and then my son at 32 and a bit. I was working in a marriage that was really not very, I won't say just happy, but made my anxiety a lot worse. I'm always a little bit hesitant to talk about that one. I wrote a book, but I literally lost every sense of my self-worth in that marriage. So there was a lot of rebuilding to do. And, for a good period of time, the alcohol helped me survive that situation. And I had all of my family were interstate, so I was on my own a lot. But I was managing day to day. And when it came to my children, in the early days with my drinking, it wasn't something that I was exposing them to, or they were at any kind of risk. Ironically, at the end of the day, even when I was in my absolute worst state, I had an incredible family, and I remarried, divorced again, but I remarried a pretty great guy that was brilliant with my children, and my family were. So I was one of the very fortunate ones that had a support network that was watching the wheels fall off, but were taking the slack. So ask my children, and it's really funny. They don't remember my drinking as such. They remember Mum being sick a lot because I slept a lot in, the latter part especially, and was always sick. Just a different kind of sick to what they thought.
Yeah. What would you consider to be your darkest moment, or what are you ashamed about from that period in your life?
The could-haves. I think I was really lucky. I had a much higher power looking after me. It wasn't my time to go. I think I've done a lot of work on this, and it's really hard to, I guess, describe because I've forgiven myself for a lot. However, I really do regret not being as present as I should have been, albeit everything I did was for my children. I regret that it took me as long as it did to get some help. I regret that I just, but yeah, I guess you can't regret losing yourself, but I regret that I lost time. And when I got sober, I felt like for the first few years, I was just on this absolute fucking mission to get back lost years. That's what it was for me, is I felt like realistically, I lost almost a decade. My 30s were not what I had wanted them to be. And yeah, I regret that I'd not done it sooner.
Yeah. So you're self-medicating and then you kind of end up in rehab.
Yep.
Who suggested help for you?
Yep. The 12 rock bottoms. I was living in Melbourne and I was not doing very well at all. And my family were on the Gold Coast. I was remarried at the time, and it was kind of, I had an opportunity to come to Queensland with my children, and I was going to do a year up here and just in my head, just get my shit together, right? Because that's all you have to do. A little bit of help and we'll be fine. Not the big elephant in the room, which is this is going to take a lot of fucking work, and it's the alcohol that is your undoing. So I came back to Queensland. It was very, very planned, and I was staying with my parents. My husband at the time was still working in Melbourne and traveling back and forth, and everybody had an inkling that things were not good, but it wasn't until I got here that they realized just how bad they were. And I remember I'd fractured my hand just before maybe 6 weeks before I came up. I still have no idea how I did that. That was the middle of the night, probably fall into a wall kind of thing. And that was still fractured, and clearly I was about 49 kilos, so I wasn't eating. I'd completely replaced food with alcohol. My GGT ended up just before I went to rehab at about 2,500, should be under 42. So I was showing signs of cirrhosis of the liver. My triglycerides were through the roof. I could have had a heart attack at any point in time. I was really, really, really physically unwell, and it was just a fight for survival. So when I got here and everybody realized this is really much worse than we thought, there was pretty much a family intervention. And I unfortunately had a couple of emergency visits where I was non-responsive at like 9:30 in the morning. I blew 0.38 at 9:30 in the morning.
Is that because you're waking up and drinking, or you're still drinking?
Yeah, it was that particular time was the top up. I was just, it was like when I came up to Queensland and I had more family to support me, that I took my foot off the pedal even more, and just, I don't know if it was a surrender, but it got worse before it got better. I think because I knew that my kids were 100% looked after. I could not, there wasn't this hypervigilance around, trying to make sure that all of my remotely sober hours are spent making sure that they're completely fine. But the emergency room visit, that was, I'd been drinking the night before. I'd probably taken some of my Valium as well, which was what I used when I couldn't drink, just to take the edge off the hangover. And I remember that morning, my sister was coming to look after me because my parents had gone to Sydney for the weekend, and she grabbed me at about 9:00, 9:30. The kids had been taken to school once again. I love it. People see these podcasts, they go, "Where were your kids?" I had my kids looked after. And she picked me up, and I remember I had gone through my dad's liquor cabinet and taken the top off like most of the spirits. So, to try and go as undetected as I could. Because at that point, I wasn't in rehab. I was about to be put in rehab. And I'd literally taken enough so no one really knew that I'd taken anything. So I ended up with this tumbler full of it was blue liquid.
Ugh.
And I think I drank a couple of those. So I literally cannot remember. My sister put me in the car, and then I remember walking in her house and I said, I've got to lie down. I just need a bit more sleep. And then she came in, she couldn't wake me. So the next thing I knew, I was in an ambulance on the way to the hospital, and they're asking me, what have you taken? It was just the light bulb moments going off everywhere. And I said, I haven't taken anything. I'm just crying. I said, I just want to go home. And you're not going anywhere. So I had 2 visits like that in pretty quick succession. And then my daughter, and this is probably the big light bulb moment for me, my stepdad he'd picked the kids up from school, brought them back to me. I'd just moved into my own place, but he'd brought them back to me in the afternoon after school, and he looked at me, and I'd snuck in some vodka somewhere that day, and he said, I'm sorry, Jess, I can't leave the kids with you. Still gets me every time. It will still always be my turning point. And my daughter looked at me, and she's sitting on the couch, and she had tears in her eyes, and she said, just, Mum, I'm scared you're never going to get better. And you know what? I honestly think there was divine intervention there, because at that point in time, it was not conscious, but something in me said, this has to fucking stop. You have to do it. You have to do it for them. And I was only talking to one of my clients the other day, and because I constantly talk about you need a why. If you don't have a why, you'll fly all over the fucking place forever. You have to have a why. And your why doesn't have to be you. This is where I'll challenge it, because not always, when you don't like yourself and you don't think you've got anything worth giving to anybody, how the fuck do you get sober for you at that point? For me, it was my kids. For me, I needed to be present and there for my kids. That changed clearly once I, got the balls were in motion, or the wheels were in motion, but it didn't change until I was strong enough in myself to believe, oh, hang on, maybe you're worth this as well. So I do challenge that it has to be all about you initially. So that was it. And, when I talk about it, I hope to God that it still always evokes that emotion, because that is my reason. That's my evidence, and that's what I can never go back to.
Does your daughter remember that time?
Yeah.
That day?
I think so. Yep, she does. It's interesting. My kids are so supportive of me. And when they were old enough to really know what had gone on, they were told in, a child's way, and then, an adult's way. And then clearly I became very public about it and started talking about it, writing about it, and talking on television and whatever. So they had to have a good understanding. My son doesn't remember a lot other than I was sick. But they also never knew at the time that I went to rehab. So I went in on a day program twice. I did the revolving door for that one. So I was coming home at night time. So they thought I was doing a business course at the time. That was it. But that doesn't matter. They didn't need to know then.
And Justine, I think we need to portray to people how different of a time that was. Sobriety has only just become cool. You can speak more on this in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who went to rehab unless they were Lindsay Lohan back in those days. How did you feel about going? Were you like, this is so embarrassing, I'm not going to tell anyone? Or, what was the thought process?
There probably wasn't a lot of thought about it at the time. To be fair, social media was only just starting to even become more prevalent. I think, I can't even remember if I go back to what even year, I think Instagram had just come about. I didn't tell a lot of people. The family close to me knew. My circle that mattered knew that's what I was doing, because also if I didn't have that kind of accountability,
you need the support. Totally.
Yeah, definitely. But it's interesting because fitness was a huge part of my, getting sober, and that became the core foundation of my wellness. And that's why, with my business and everything, the Sober Fit method and the Sober Fit mentorship, it became my AA. If anything, it was fitness was the foundation of me, the overarching theme of me getting well for many reasons. But when I first became a personal trainer, so I was corporate and then I got sober, and because fitness had been such an integral part of my recovery, there was this, oh my gosh, this is where I've got to go to. Because I did that visit in the hospital. I asked the big man upstairs and I said, get me out of this. I don't know how, I don't know whatever it fucking takes. I will pay you back. I will pay you back. And I did not know that was going to be the gift of sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
That would become my purpose. So I started blogging, and blogging was around back then loosely first about my fitness and what I was doing in personal training, and I had my personal training business. But then the moment I started speaking about where I was at or had been at with my alcohol, and the more honest and raw I became, the larger the following, the bigger the engagement, and the more clarity around, aha, here it is.
Mm-hmm.
These messages of, I'm exactly where you were, I don't know how to get out. That I don't know how to get out was like, that's it, Justine. You found a way. I still feel obligated, probably too much so sometimes, to pass that on, because I never want another soul where I can to feel the depths of despair that you do when you're in the height of addiction and you don't know how you're going to get out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because it feels like, it does feel like it will never end.
And you feel like you're the only one who's ever gone through it, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's true.
What did you learn about yourself, either through rehab or in those early years of sobriety, that you had never known until you got sober? What did you discover about yourself?
I discovered that I'm a lot more powerful than I ever thought I was, and that I had the capacity to do things that I never thought I could do. But, alcohol's a liar. It tells you you need it, and it tells you you can't do this. So there are those sorts of things. I think I'd always knew, but I didn't really know the full extent of my ability to have compassion, and that compassion would be my driver ongoing in all areas of my life. I work in a youth work job a few days a week as well. So I work with troubled teens, that not so much troubled teens, but kids that need opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And I thrive on that. I think I'm a lot more selfless than I thought I was, whether that's something I've adopted through my sobriety or that was always there. There's so many facets to sobriety. There's the finding parts of you that weren't there before, or, remembering who you are, but then developing new ways of being. So they all kind of intertwine for me. And, I've also just age and getting older and wisdom. And I'm really thankful that my 40s were sober years, because the changes that I've had psychologically, and we started to talk about this before, through perimenopause and all those sorts of things, it's a really challenging time, but I really feel like I have so much more wisdom than I've ever had. And I even at times where I'm feeling, self-conscious or a little bit, unworthy, which we all do, that's something that doesn't just, we don't have magical shields when we get sober. In fact, we probably got less of a shield than what we ever had. But I feel like I can tackle these things a lot better.
Should we go back to the menopause and
yes,
let's
hormones.
link that? Okay. You start off stuff, because I'm going to be clunky about it.
It's funny. Okay, so perimenopause was something that I'd never really been told a lot about. You go through it. In fact, I didn't really know the difference between perimenopause and menopause. And so I'm 52 now, and I started quite late with my perimenopause, but it can start at 35. It just depends. The average age is about 40.
But I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's when your hormones are starting to decline, essentially, and particularly estrogen, but all of them do. And we, as women, if you actually have a look at the rates of suicide in women, they've always been much lower than men, but they peak between 45 and 55. That's no coincidence. The psych hospitals 50 years ago were full of menopausal women, but it's only been in the last couple of years. And if you, like anything with social media or, digital content, you start looking for it, you'll find it. It is such an incredibly challenging time for women. That decline in estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, but particularly estrogen, has a huge impact on every part of our body. We have, I can't remember the actual number, but it's hundreds of estrogen receptors in our body. And a lot of them are in our brain, and they have a lot to do with our serotonin levels and dopamine and all of those kinds of things. So coming into perimenopause, women are, if you think about, you being PMT when you're a teenager or even now, you think about how unsettled you might feel or all over the place or reactive or sad or anxious and all of that kind of thing. And I know myself that even when I was hormonal through my drinking, now that I've got nearly 12 years of sobriety, I could see when now in my cycle I would be literally premenstrual or something like that. And that's when my alcohol intake would go up because I'm like, oh, all of a sudden I'm more anxious, I'm this, that, and the other. But it was all hormonal shifts. So perimenopause and menopause are no different. And women, if you're already drinking before you get to perimenopause, you're up shit creek. I wrote an article about this, about the fact that had I been still drinking through perimenopause, I would have literally lost the plot.
Yeah, you were saying before you would have might not have been here today.
No, definitely not. I don't think I would have been. I've, had some really, really dark thoughts through perimenopause, even particularly in the last, 12, 18 months, really dark thoughts, stuff that I've never thought of before. And I'm just so glad that I've got no poisons or toxins that are trying to tell me something that's not real either. But, there's the physical aspects as well, because women, as we age, I think it's something like our livers work at a third of the rate that they used to. So all these women that are in perimenopause, and you read lots about women, over 40, they're saying, I can't tolerate alcohol anymore. That's your body. That's your liver doesn't process it. So you're pushing shit uphill as it is, but it's a really difficult, challenging time. And I can only think of how bad it would have been had I still been drinking.
Well, you got that, you got the OCD, you got the thoughts of like, oh, this would be so much easier if I self-medicated. What do you actually do every day to kind of, you've rocked up here, you've got an amazing energy. Is it your physical exercise? Like what can you attribute to you now?
Still, look, my core foundation is sleep, nutrition, and exercise. That's my foundation of wellness, and it will be until as long as I can, till the day I die, kind of thing. They are the things that just keep me on track. I make a point of getting enough sleep. Sleep's huge.
How many hours do you get?
I reckon 8, 9.
And you have to get that many?
I'm not great when I don't. Like last week I had some really shitty sleeps, and I know straight away my OCD will kick up a notch. It's just general
that's really
anxiety.
vital for you.
Yeah. That any time that I've got a lot of adrenaline, it will be like that. I don't eat. I've got an 80-20 rule with my food, so I don't deprive myself of anything, but I keep everything in check. I exercise. I train gym probably at least 3 to 4 times per week. I do a lot of walking, a lot of self-care stuff, breathing, but I just try and make sure that I'm surrounding myself with people who are also trying to live their best life. I think there's a lot to say for taking on other people's energy. I don't have time for bullshit anymore. I have less and less tolerance for people that don't sit good in my space. So I just don't do it.
Does that strengthen through sobriety? Because as you're talking, I'm like, I already feel like that 2 years in, I'm a bit scared. I might end up just rocking back and forth in a corner. Yeah.
I think it did for me. I know that a lot of people still have, there's some people that can be 5 years sober and still have FOMO about general life. And, I wish I could have a drink. I lost that really quickly. I think I liked my life so much that I didn't want to. That's what I say in my business. I've definitely steered away from in the latter years about so much the abstinence from alcohol, because people can't always relate to being a near-death alcoholic like I was. I mean, I was told I had 3 months to live in the end. So it was dire. I didn't start like that. It wasn't like that in the middle. It just ended like that. And you don't need that rock bottom to stop. But I think the FOMO thing for me it didn't occur. I say, let's create a lifestyle where alcohol no longer fits. Change the way that we perceive it. And so I know when I started training and started exercising in particular, because the first year out of rehab, I still drank on the odd occasion because I thought I could be a social drinker. It was a bit of trial and error. It never worked. It never ended well. But what I found it did is it stopped me from doing the things that I had learnt to love, like my training. If I was going to drink, I really was not in a good position the next day to do that. And I valued that so much more than what I valued what alcohol was going to do in the end. I learnt to deal with a lot of the things that I'd not dealt with. So the need to want to, escape was less and less. In fact, I liked my life so much more. I made fucking hard decisions that I knew I had to make that I instantly was rewarded for when I, actually decided enough is enough. I still feel that now. The hardest decisions, it's like, whether you're religious or higher power, whoever it is that you believe in, when I make decisions that have been really challenging to make, but I know intrinsically are the right ones, it's like I'm given an instant reward of some kind. That's like, here's that, see, I told you, that's what it is.
It's those ticks from the universe. Hey, I was the exact same. I just moved through life thinking life is so hard. It's pushing shit up a hill. I was just born to be poor. I was born to be this, that. And no, it was just the substance abuse.
Yeah.
But we'll do anything but put down the alcohol. As soon as I put down the alcohol, a little, I can't remember what happened, but I got this little tick, right? As soon as I started speaking out, it's like tick. Even with this podcast, it's like tick, tick, tick. It almost becomes addictive in nature.
Yeah, it does.
Oh.
Oh, there's no doubt that I certainly replaced certain things with other things. And that's part of my nature, whether I've got an undiagnosed ADHD diagnosis in there as well. Who knows? I don't care. It doesn't matter. My brain is the way that it is. And, I've learned to live with it sometimes better than others. But I definitely see the signs of good decision making as... Yeah, it's definitely a reward of some kind that tells me you're on the right track.
Mm-hmm. And you still get that now 12 years
100%,
in. That's
100%.
so exciting. I love
and it
hearing
doesn't
that.
have to be about alcohol anymore. It's just my decisions. What eliminating alcohol from my life really did was give me clarity of thought. I call it sober clarity. That's my tagline for it. It's sober clarity because I don't always know what's going to happen. I'm not saying I always make the correct decision, but I make decisions with a clear head, and that's what's the complete difference. I think one of the things that I now have the ability to do is connect to my soul and to my intuition way better than I ever have. I think I had that connection as a kid. I think we probably all do, some of us more so than others. I definitely was the type of kid that I saw things, a lot of, different visual things in the dark, whether I saw people, talk to people or whatever have you. I definitely had a connection to something that I lost for numerous years. But I definitely now am 100% in tune with my intuition. Do I always choose to listen to it? Not immediately, but I usually get there in the end.
Because, Justine, often it's the hardest freaking option. It's like when I had this full body knowing that Sydney was no longer for me. And I thought, no. And when you try and go, that's not it. And you know intuitively that it's the right decision for you. Mm-hmm. I think you're the perfect person to ask because from what I can gather by you say, like you might have undiagnosed ADHD and you don't sort of subscribe to labels, I would say. Is it important for you? And the reason why I'm asking this is because I've recently decided to stop calling myself an addict because I think that it kept me at this level.
Yep.
Does that resonate with you? Do you, choose to not subscribe to labels?
I think sometimes labels are what's required to help us understand ourselves, but
Yes.
then how we continue to use that or I guess integrate it into our life is different. The addict thing, I refer to myself as a former addict, but I don't bang on about it all the time. I guess some people don't feel safe if they don't say it. They think maybe I'll go back to it. Everyone's got their own reasons. It doesn't define who I am. It definitely doesn't define who I am. And sometimes I think that it can empower you. At the same time, it can disempower you. I think it's everybody's own choice as to the labels thing. Sometimes I think I've been probably too head in the sand about it and not. That's for example my OCD.
Yeah.
Had I actually learnt what that was about earlier on and decided, okay, I am going to get a formal diagnosis here, maybe my life would have been different and I would have understood myself more. But I learn it. What I try to do is learn about it and then put it to bed.
Yeah.
It's more for me, the label is around being able to understand where I can potentially, what's working for me, what's not working, where am I at? Is this normal? Who's normal? But you know what I mean. The addict thing though, yeah, nearly 12 years on, it's not a label that I talk about all the time. It just tends to come up in something like this,
Yeah. And I still find that even when I interview, I still slip up and call myself an addict, but it's not what I go by anymore. Does that make sense? And
I would prefer to say for me, I'm a sobriety advocate.
Yeah, okay, love that.
Because that for me is more along the lines of what I'm trying to get across in my message now is that, abstinence can be absolutely beautiful. And I think for people to be able to really live to the fullest capacity, their full life intention, the less we fuck around with what we put into our body that, inhibits us psychologically, the more likely it is to happen. That's pretty much it. I had this conversation with somebody the other day. Can we really live our full true potential if we're poisoning ourselves? Even every now and then. I don't know. Because I don't want to, I don't ever want to come across as everybody in the world should be sober. But I think that there are too many people, such a large percentage of people in today's society that are not using alcohol for enjoyment. They're using it to medicate. That is misuse of alcohol.
Justine, I've loved talking to you. And this will be my final question. I would love to know, like I keep banging on about, 12 years on, I'm just in absolute awe of you. What healing modalities do you still use to this day?
The exercise, I know I've mentioned it, for going to the gym for me is my church. It's my AA. I feel safe there. It's temptation for alcohol is gone for me. So it's not 12 years on, I'm not tempted by alcohol anymore. And I've had some really challenging life things happen in 12 years, as you can imagine. And not one of them I picked up a drink for. And that I'm, super, super proud of. Getting myself out in nature. I love, for me, seeing the ocean is a real healing modality in itself. I'm not great with yoga and things like that. People ask me that. I think some people expect me to say, yeah, well, I've been breath work 12 times a day. I don't.
I'm the same.
One of the things that I do is be uber aware of where I'm at any point in time. And if that for me is then going for a walk down the beach, it could be that I just need to go to the shops and walk around and get some dopamine. Like, some of these strategies are not necessarily what we would deem as traditional. Sometimes I need space. I also have a social barometer where I quite often, I'm like, okay, I've had enough for now. And I'm quite extroverted, but I need some downtime.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think my other healing modality has always been writing, and writing about what I do and helping other people. So living a purposeful life for me is also part of my healing, and that will be part of my sober maintenance for the rest of my life. I think if I continue to surround myself with people that need my help, then I have a purpose, and I think that's healing in itself.
I agree completely. Where can my listeners find your writing?
So I've all of my social media, but I also write occasionally for Mamma Mia. If you
Mhm.
just Google my name, you'll probably find 1,000,001 articles. But on my Instagram bio, there is a link to all of my media bits and pieces and articles that I've written, and on my website as well. So
Perfect. I'll
yeah,
link
I'm
everything.
sure you'll link them
Of
up. Yeah.
course. Thank you so much for coming on
You're
Soberly
very welcome. Thank
Speaking.
you for having me. Lovely to meet you.